What's up, world changers? It's Nathalie Nelson Parker, and it's another World Changer Wednesday. And I'm super excited because today, for the nonprofit and small business leaders that are feeling frustrated, for those of you who are feeling overwhelmed with what is happening around us, if you're feeling like my mission, my vision, my purpose is sure, but right now I feel like I am swimming underwater and I cannot catch a breath. I am so glad that you're on this World Changer Wednesday today because I am spilling the tea, baby. Okay. Think of this of not just as a webinar, but I am going to walk you through a case study. I'm going to give you the blueprint of how not only we have done multiple six figures by taking our grants and our service and turning them into contract services, but I'm going to share how we've been able to do that for a very specific client of ours. All right. And so today I want you to go ahead, if you're excited and you're seeing this on social media, go ahead in the comments and put hashtag blueprint. If you're watching us on YouTube, please make sure that you subscribe so you can get more amazing videos like this. And I am going to walk you through everything I know. And you know what's also really important? This is free. Why is it free? Because I want you to succeed. I want you to thrive. I believe in who you are and what you've been called to do in this world through your nonprofit or small business. And this is World Changer Wednesday. So we're helping real people make a real impact by generating more income because that's what you need to do. So let's hop into it. If you're ready, go ahead and say, I'm ready, Nat. I'm ready. All right, let's talk about the pivot, right? How do you, as a nonprofit or a small business owner or a founder, transform your grant application into a contract? And I'm using an amazing client as a case study to show you that, right? So we're going to be talking about how do you discover the exact transformation that changed everything. We're going to talk about how sometimes our rejection, particularly in her case, a grant rejection, and she came to us because she saw one of the webinars. We met for lunch. I told her the story, and she was like, "Well, do you think because this funder has funded me for so long, do you think that maybe I could turn it us into a contract?" I said, "Girl, of course you could, and I'm gonna show you how to do it." So this is a real story of how strategic repositioning, and sometimes you need the rejection, right? Sometimes it's somebody telling you no. Sometimes it's hitting rock bottom that helps you to get up quicker than you ever knew you can. And create the type of sustainable funding that is under your control rather than controlled by someone else. So let's hop into it. And so we're going to be talking about how one nonprofit founder transformed her grant application into a contract. And I'm going to share some of the things that allowed me to do so to be able to help her. And I think that's so important when you think about your nonprofit or small business, right? What you become an expert in is what you experience. So as I'm telling this story of how it happened to me and how I was able to help someone else, I want you to think about in your own nonprofit or small business, what are the pivots that you need to make and the stories and the experience that empowers you to position yourself to help others as well? So here's the starting point. It has to come from a reality check, right? And there's nothing more that checks you than some kind of dependency crisis, whether that's dependency on a grant, whether that's dependency on another human being, whether that's anything that's outside of your control that really pigeonholes you from being able to move forward in your nonprofit or small business. So this client, we're going to call her Sarah, okay? Because I ain't putting my girl's business all out in the street. And she ran a youth mentorship nonprofit for about 3 years. And despite having solid programming and measurable outcomes, she faced consistent financial uncertainty, whether that's through grant rejections, whether it was fewer awards than she's been awarded before, and it really became a struggle. Does that sound familiar for anyone? Right? And I mean, it happens. Before the grant hamster wheel, it was 18 grant applications submitted over 40 hours, three small business award, maybe 22,000, endless reporting cycles, right? And then you look up and you realize I am doing more work to get these grants than to actually expand my nonprofit or my small business. And so there has to be a mindset revolution where you realize, like Sarah, like me as a grantee, that, man, I could do something different, right? How can I fund my work? How can I solve this challenge, right? And then your language change from wanting a funder to do it for you and finding the solutions to do it for yourself. And so your language then has to transform, right? When you're doing grant funding language, there's this posturing that happens. And when I say posturing, it's like, hey, with the money you provide for these at risk, marginalized communities, whatever the buzzwords is that we have to use, who lack this, who need opportunities, right? In that language, you're innately focused on need and deficit, and you're posturing or positioning as a passive recipient, but you also like are using a community in a way that's like generic, right? But when you move to contract language, right, we deliver these measurable reduction in recidivism, or whatever your program is, through evidence-based mentorship model with 94% completion rate, right? Then your language shifts from I'm at in deficit to this is what we do, this is what we provide, these are the outcomes, this is the solution. I am a service provider, I'm an authority in this, and this is the value or the investment that you make. This was so important, particularly for Sarah, as she realized, oh my goodness, we are valuable. We are worth the investment. We are worthy partners, right? Because now you're repositioning yourself from a program to a solution provider, to a service provider. And so that youth mentorship program, which, was a very good program, had the results, but the way it was positioned, it seemed generic. It seemed like, it was just activities based on community need. But she started seeing, hey, we're making real results and we're reducing a lot of the challenges in this community by addressing measurable institutional results. And that is what leads to collaborative, strategic partnership, right? Delivering mutual value and sustainability. And then you can also think about like who needs this service and who has the money, whether it's a school district, wink, wink, whether it's a city or a municipality, whether it's a corporation that this particular thing aligns with, whether it's a healthcare system, whether it's juvenile justice department, you are able to then to reposition this grant program into a solution that someone or some entity is willing to invest in. Then you have to make what I call the 4-step framework. And this changes everything. You shift your positioning from need, want, help, deficiency to strategic partner with proven frameworks that has solutions and not just a problem. Then you package that service. You turn that grant into deliverables, into sellable service packages that institutions understand and fund. And you can go online and see, what do they fund? What are they investing in? And be able to position that, what was once a grant program, into a service. Then I need you to leverage your impact data. You have to do this already for your grants, right? You have to do impact reports. You have to measure things. So how do you use your outcomes and your metrics to then create compelling case studies, which is literally what I'm doing right now with the results that we've been able to do in terms of the contracts that we've shifted from grants to consulting, as well as how we've helped Sarah to prove, right, that we have value as a contract partner. And then this is the key. You got to target the right institutions, right? You don't want to go to people who aren't spending that type of money. You have to find out who's spending, what are they spending on, and where is the alignment, not just with our mission, vision, and purpose, but also with how much this particular investment really costs, and do they have the capacity and capability to pay that? And then you learn the language that they respond to. All right. So the positioning is the power move. It took a couple of coffees. It took some coaching, right? Because let's be real, I'm saying this now as someone who's made this pivot over the last couple of years, right? We've been full time in our consulting for 4 years, right? So how I feel about grants has changed based on when we first started doing grants, right? Now I really don't do grants that often because we don't need to, because we've reached a state of sustainability. So I say this with understanding how sometimes what we don't know seems so frightening. But Sarah had to get to the place where she reframed her organization's identity, right? Instead of being a youth mentorship nonprofit seeking funding, she had to say, we're recidivism reduction specialists. We're delivering measurable outcomes that not just impact the youth, but creates sustainable communities and creates citizens that are productive in society. It took her a while to get there, but that shift in how she saw herself and her organization is what attracted partners to her. It helped her to be able to go to school districts, go to institutions of higher education, and be able to get multiple six figures. One contract that she's going after now is almost $1 million. It's over $700,000. Okay. And it comes because she took her specific problems that worked and used it to solve problems and become a decision maker who budgets solutions. And that's so important. That is the first step. The second step is service packaging that sells, right? So what does a 12-month mentorship package look like? Right? What is the structured curriculum delivery? What are the progress reports? What are the completion guarantees, right? What does it look like in terms of what that particular client needs, wants, and desires? How do you multiply it, right? What does the training look like? Is it for staff? Is it evidence-based? Is it implementation support? Is it ongoing consultation? And then, of course, the outcome evaluation system. How can I say after you pay me this money that I've met every metric that we promised on the front end, right? So your custom metrics dashboard, your quarterly analysis report, your continuing improvement, right? What does that look like? Sarah made it easy for institutions to understand their purpose and their purchase because she was outcome focused on her services and was able to define those deliverables in her pricing. So then let's talk about your impact data as your sales engine, right? So if you say you have a 94 program completion rate, that is higher than the industry standard, which is 67, which for an organization, a city, a company, a school district, 94 completion rate is something that is impactful because it also can impact future funding, whether that's federally, whether that's through other partners. And so there's a vested interest in the outcome that you offer them. If you're reducing recidivism by 73% compared to what most counties experience, which is 45, that means you're positioning yourself not only as an expert, but as someone who is doing above average. And then that allows you to quantify what the cost is, right? 2,400 cost per participant versus 12,000 average cost on other programs, right? And then being able to cast that out in terms of how long so that you can see the ROI. So all of that is important, but it really depends on your contract partners, right? Someone can pay $2,400 a client. The average nonprofit probably can't. So this is where it becomes really strategic in terms of who you're identifying as your target. And so Sarah had to stop chasing funding grant funding because she reached her cap. They weren't going to fund anymore. So we started to think about, okay, if we're talking about children, youth who are at risk, and we know that they're at risk not because there's something innately wrong with them, but it is a reflection of their environment, right? It's a reflection of uh, poverty. It's a reflection of lack of representation, lack of resources, right? We know that crime is not because something is wrong with people, but it's often a reflection of the environment that they're born into. And so we started to think about who has a vested interest in making sure that children thrive, who has a vested interest in seeing that children are mentored so that they can become productive citizens. And that's when we started walking through juvenile justice departments, school districts, cities, right? Where they're having discipline challenges, healthcare systems that's tracking community outcomes. And that was the shift that she made in finding new partners. Because then it wasn't about finding the 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 right people necessarily, but it's about the right language and the decision makers who understood the value that she had to offer. And that is so important. So, what does that look like in terms of sustainable growth and impact? And I'll use kind of our work together, right? So, it took a couple of months for her to make the pivot, to get comfortable, to start changing the language, to start moving from a program into a contract. And by month 3, her first contract was signed. So that first 3 months was making that pivot, creating her collateral, developing relationships, learning the language of the decision makers, learning who the decision makers are, learning how much they spend. And then by the 3rd month, she was able to really put together a proposal, and that contract was signed. And her first program was with a county. And she started proving the concept and building the relationship. By month 8, the contract then expanded the services, right? Because of the successful pilot outcomes and demonstrated ROI. Month 12, it became a multi-year agreement. She was able to have renewal based on her performance metrics, but this is what I loved. She was able to take that 1 year experience with one county and then create strategic partnerships and meet new people, right? Because then you become invested in the field, in the industry, and this experience leads to another, and then you go to this conference, right? And so then additional training and contract and consultant roles were opened up to her, especially now in policy development, because there was so much success in what she offered. And this is what I want for you, world changers. I want you to know that your grant skills are a business asset, right? That you have outcomes that are measurable. And you've done that through your grant reporting skills, that you know how to manage performance, that you know what an ROI demonstration should look like, and you can do that on demand for partners. You know proposal writing, right? Which means you know narrative development, which is a powerful sales tool, but it's also important for creating compelling contracts and proposals and case studies, which I'm sharing with you today. We've been able to do it, and now Sarah has done it as well. And then you know program design, right? You know how to create a structured intervention and why it's important. And now you can take that and use it for an institution so that they can purchase your specialized service. I want you to know that, like Sarah, you already have the skill. You just need to reframe it into a business asset rather than a compliance requirement. And so I want you to start the transformation today. Go ahead, if you haven't already, download our uh, 5 quick ways to position your grant work as contract ready services. You can go ahead and download it. We have the link in the bio, as well as if you're watching from YouTube, in the caption below. And then next week's session, we're going to go into the 5 grant skills that are actually $1 million business assets, right? Because we want you to discover what you already know, but reframe it so that you know that it's worth more than you think. All right, World Changers, I'm so glad that you were able to join us for World Changer Wednesday. I hope you enjoyed this webinar. If you did, go ahead, let me know, like, share, comment. If you're on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe so that you can hear and see when we post all of our other webinars and training. All right, that's it. That's all, says the clock on the wall. I'll see you next week, and go ahead, be amazing on purpose.